I was born in December of 1960 in New Orleans, Louisiana. I was born at Flint Goodrich Hospital, which was one of the two hospitals in the city of New Orleans where African American children were born. I've been blessed to have two very special and remarkable parents. They raised me and my brother and my sister in a way that we never wanted anything, never needed anything. All of our needs were accounted for, and they got all three of us through college. I grew up in the Carrollton section of New Orleans, and my parents enrolled us in a school called Mater Dei Rosa, which is in the Riverbend section of New Orleans. And we were enrolled in school a couple of years after the schools of the Archdiocese of New Orleans were integrated by Archbishop Rummel at the time. And so we were enrolled, and I was the only black kid in my class in kindergarten. I was made to sit at the back of the class at a table by myself. At the time, I didn't realize that I was being treated any differently. I don't believe I was scarred by that. But I think there was a lovely result of all of that was that in my first year, my first grade, my teacher at the time learned about the nun who taught me, having placed me at the back of the class, and she herself was so upset by that I sat in the first row in her class in first grade, and she always took great pains to ensure that I felt comfortable. To high school in New Orleans at a high school that was intended for young men, as they called it, young men considering the seminary, St. John Vianney Prep. I called it a failed experiment because at the age of 13 or 14 years old, they asked, will you consider the priesthood? And of course, sure, I guess. And then by 14, 15 years old, you have your first girlfriend, and nobody ever became a priest. Well, because my father was not able to complete his education, he insisted that the three of us do so. And he worked very hard to ensure that, as did my mother. They taught us the value of hard work and the value of education. There was no choice in my family about whether you would go to college. You would go to college. The only question is, where will you go to college? My brother and I decided to attend Xavier because growing up in New Orleans as a black Catholic, that was the place to go. Xavier University is still the only black Catholic college in the United States. I met a good friend when I was in college by the name of Rodney Armstrong. And Rodney had just graduated from the Southern University Law School. He became a big brother to me and a mentor in many respects. He knew that I attended St. John Prep and still sort of had in the back of my mind whether I should pursue the seminary. And he would tell me all the time, it's like, Brian, you don't want to be a priest. You want to be a lawyer. You want to be a lawyer because lawyers have all the fun. And it was largely because of Rodney's influence and that of other lawyers who were Southern-trained lawyers that I met through him that I decided to enroll in law school. I decided to enroll at Southern. I just believed that Southern was the place for me. While I was a student at Southern, I was a member of the Moot Court Board, but I also served as editor-in-chief of the Law Review, and that was the organization that took up most of my time, involved in preparing manuscripts and preparing to have law reviews published and that sort of thing. Back then, I assumed that I would have to maybe hang a shingle or perhaps enter practice with a friend or maybe an older lawyer who could mentor me in those first few years of the practice, those critical years. But I was fortunate to have been urged by my good friend, Brace Godfrey, to apply for what is called the Attorney General's Honor Law Graduate Program for the Department of Justice, and I did so. And quite remarkably for me, was accepted and became an honor law grad, as they call it, at the Department of Justice. My first assignment was in Los Angeles, where I handled immigration cases for the government. That was a wonderful experience because it required me to be in immigration court every day, 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. And that experience enabled me to learn my way around a courtroom and how to examine and cross-examine witnesses, how to present evidence. Several years later, while living in Washington, D.C. for the third time, I spent many years with the Justice Department, where I worked in Washington and elsewhere. I decided to enroll at Georgetown to pursue a degree, a Master's of Laws degree, as it's called, in the area of international comparative law. Eventually became an assistant U.S. attorney in New Orleans, where I handled a variety of different types of crimes: major drug crimes, immigration crimes, firearms crimes, some corruption cases. But that too provided me the opportunity to get to court a lot. In fact, I tried 9 jury trials to verdict in my last 12 months there in the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Orleans. I was then promoted to a position in Main Justice, where I was in charge of evaluating or inspecting U.S. Attorney's offices around the country. After that experience, I was offered the position of what we call First Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Middle District of Louisiana in Baton Rouge. That's essentially the Chief Deputy position. And so I took on that position and eventually was promoted to a position again in Washington, where I served as what's called an Associate Deputy Attorney General. I was responsible for relations between the 94 U.S. attorneys and the main justice components. It required a great deal of time with the Attorney General, because you're on the staff of the Deputy Attorney General, so there often I would have to attend meetings with Deputy Attorney General Holder or Attorney General Janet Reno. It was just a fascinating time. I got to meet a lot of nice people, interesting people, and work on some very important matters. When I entered private practice, I joined a law firm called Lisco and Lewis. But I felt like I was ready for another professional challenge. And so when I entered private practice, I would like to think that I was able to help people, good people. I represented a major oil company. One of my last cases before my appointment to the bench was to represent a major oil company in an Endangered Species Act, where pelicans, Louisiana brown pelicans, which were then on the Endangered Species Act list, their wings became coated with oil and they couldn't fly away, and several of them died, even though the company had erected devices to try to prevent that. And this particular incident was unprecedented. No one had ever heard of birds perishing in this way. And the government came after my client, but nonetheless, I was able to help the folks involved convince the government and the court that this was completely unintended, and this is not a matter that's worthy of prosecution. Administrative fines, to be sure. Mm-hmm. The client learned, we will never do this again, we'll have to come out with a better plan. But that was an occasion where everyone, I think, agreed that a prosecution was not merited. One of my most valued clients, and still my very good friend, is Ruby Bridges, who in 1960 was the first African-American child to desegregate the New Orleans public schools, and who is the subject of a very famous painting by Norman Rockwell entitled "The Problem We All Live With." Well, Ruby and I became friends back when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Orleans, back in the early 1990s, late 1980s. And when I entered private practice, she was my first client. I was inducted into an organization called the American College of Trial Lawyers, which is, at least in my estimation, the most prestigious national organization of trial lawyers. Membership in the American College of Trial Lawyers is limited to what they consider to be the top 1% of trial lawyers in every state. So it was a real privilege to be invited to participate and to join that organization. I'm still a member today. Every justice of the U.S. Supreme Court is a member, and every justice of the Canadian Supreme Court is a member. During the middle of my vetting process was when I was nominated to the bench. So hopefully, and once you're on the bench, state or federal, you cannot be inducted. So fortunately, I was able to get inducted right before my appointment to the bench, and I've enjoyed immensely my association with that group. I never aspired to be a judge, much less a federal judge. I just did not ever believe that this was sort of an attainable goal, especially to become a federal judge. I mean, the stars have to align in a certain way. In my case, it was, I think, having worked in the Justice Department directly with people like Eric Holder when he was the Attorney General of the United States, is the time that I was nominated. That helped. Also, I was active in the Federal Bar Association's New Orleans chapter. I was on the board of directors there. So while it's not an easy job, it's an immensely rewarding job. And I think I speak for all federal judges in saying that I'm just grateful for the honor to do this job for our nation.
Brian Jackson is a United States District Judge who was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2008. At first, he noticed some discoloration that eventually became painful. After several visits to different doctors, a dermatologist ordered a biopsy and tested Brian's tissue for cancer.
I am a breast cancer survivor. And every October, I try to take the opportunity to chat to fellows and to remind guys that, you know, all of us were born with breast tissue, not just women. So we're all susceptible to this disease. I had no clue that I would ever be diagnosed with breast cancer. And sadly, when most men realize that something is wrong and we finally seek medical treatment, very often the disease is staged and it reaches the advanced stages. And so the outcomes are not very positive. You know, I thought I was a confirmed bachelor until I met my wife. I spoke at an American Bar Association seminar in New York, and some friends from Washington came up, and one of my friends declared that I have found the perfect wife for you. And I replied that I've been told this all of my life. Good luck. But he was right. My wife was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. She works as a contractor with the Department of Homeland Security. She has a background in public health. We met. We've been married now for 10 years. My biggest regret is that we didn't meet each other earlier on in life. My first boss right out of law school with the Department of Justice was a lawyer, judge, later to become a judge, named Michael Creppy, who took me under his wing and was hard on me as a young honor law graduate lawyer. And I didn't understand why was he being so hard on me. And later I learned he felt like I had real potential. And I'm so grateful to him that he saw that. During my time on the bench, I will tell you, Judge Ralph Tyson, who swore me in and who served as the chief judge at the time. And sadly, we lost about a little over a year after he swore me in. We lost Judge Tyson to cancer, but I'm so grateful to him, and I certainly value his guidance and leadership. And Judge Ivan Lamel, who took me under his wing, he's a judge on the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Louisiana. I met him when he was a magistrate judge down there, and he's been immensely helpful to me. To this day, he's someone that I call regularly to sort of just bounce things off of. And finally, I will say, there's been so many people, but I have to mention Judge Carl Stewart, former Chief Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Judge Stewart has been available to me and every other district judge and circuit judge in this and elsewhere. He's had such a prominent presence nationally, serving in different committees, chairing committees at the request of the Chief Justice of the United States, for instance. But he too is someone who I am grateful for mentoring me along so that I can do this job the way it ought to be done. That term, seriousness of purpose, is something that has guided me all of my career. And I would hope that would guide other young lawyers, law students, and practitioners, no matter how long you practice. There's a certain expectation. You're expected to fully commit yourself to your client, to your causes, to cases. And you do so by making a commitment, in a serious commitment. A seriousness of purpose is such an important concept, an ethos that has to guide lawyers if they want to succeed in the practice of law.